My name is Otis. I'm 21 years old and a sophomore at University of Michigan. I never expected a simple Thanksgiving break to change everything. After driving 3 hours, I arrived home excited to sleep in my own bed, only to find my bedroom completely transformed. "Oh," my mom said casually, "we gave it to your cousin. You can sleep on the couch." I stood there, stunned, keys in hand, before tossing them on the counter. "Actually, I'll sleep somewhere else." She thought I was joking until I walked right back out. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and hit that like and subscribe button as I share what happened next in my family saga. I grew up in a modest, 3-bedroom house in suburban Detroit. My family wasn't rich, but we were comfortable enough. My dad, Robert, worked as a sales manager at a local car dealership, and my mom, Linda, was an administrative assistant at an elementary school. My sister, Megan, is 2 years younger than me, currently finishing high school. We were what most people would consider a normal middle-class family. Throughout my childhood, I had what I thought was a good relationship with my parents. They came to my baseball games, attended parent-teacher conferences, and we had dinner together most nights. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were always there. But as a kid, you don't question the way your family operates. You just assume that's how all families work. Getting into University of Michigan was a dream come true. I'd worked hard through high school, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while playing varsity baseball and working weekends at a local grocery store. My parents had always told me that education was important, so I assumed they'd be thrilled when I got accepted. They were happy, but their excitement quickly turned to concerns about money. "Do you know how expensive that school is?" my dad had asked, looking at the acceptance letter like it was a bill he couldn't pay. State college would be half the cost. I understood their concerns. College is expensive, and my family didn't have a college fund set aside for me. To make it work, I took out student loans, applied for every scholarship I could find, and continued working part-time jobs. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore while taking a full course load. During summers, I picked up construction work that paid better than retail. I was doing everything I could to minimize the financial burden on my family. Still, whenever money came up in conversation with my parents, there was always an undercurrent of resentment. "We had to cut back on our vacation this year," my mom would mention, as if my tuition was directly responsible for canceling their annual trip to Florida. Never mind that they still went just for 5 days instead of 7. The first sign that something was changing at home came during my freshman year spring break. I noticed small things in my bedroom were different. My desk had been rearranged. Some books were missing from my shelves. When I asked about it, my mom casually mentioned that my cousin Jake sometimes used my room when he visited. Jake was 19, the son of my mom's sister, Aunt Debbie. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester and had been finding himself ever since. From what I gathered through family conversations, this meant working occasional jobs before quitting playing video games and relying on family members for support. "He's going through a rough patch," was my mom's standard explanation whenever Jake made a poor decision or needed money. I never understood why my parents were so quick to make excuses for him while holding me to much higher standards. During my freshman year, Jake had apparently hit a particularly rough patch. After an argument with his mom, he needed a place to stay temporarily. My parents offered our house, and specifically my room since I was away at college. "It's just until he gets on his feet," my dad had explained over the phone. "He's family, Otis. We help family." I didn't argue at the time. I was only home for holidays and summer anyway, and Jake was supposed to be gone before I came back for summer break. Except when summer came, Jake had a new excuse for why he needed to stay longer, and I ended up sleeping on an air mattress in our unfinished basement for 3 months. It was hot, uncomfortable, and I could hear every footstep from above, but I tried to be understanding. Family helps. Family right. My bedroom had always been my sanctuary. The walls were painted deep blue, a color I'd chosen when I was 12. My baseball trophies lined the top shelf of my bookcase. I had a collection of signed baseballs from Detroit Tigers games my dad and I had attended over the years. My desk still had stickers from middle school that I never bothered to remove. The room wasn't fancy, but it was mine, filled with memories and personal touches that made it feel like home. During that summer of sleeping in the basement, I noticed my parents treating Jake more like a son than a nephew. They celebrated when he got a job at the local gas station, even though he only kept it for 3 weeks. They bought him a new phone when he claimed his old one broke. Meanwhile, when I needed new tires for my car to drive back to school, my dad suggested I budget better to afford them myself. The pattern was becoming clear, but I still didn't want to accept it. These were my parents. They loved me. They were just trying to help Jake through a difficult time. I told myself that once Jake moved out, things would go back to normal. When I left for my sophomore year, Jake was still living in our house, but my parents assured me he was just about to find his own place. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. So I packed up for my second year of college, with the expectation that by Thanksgiving break, my room would be mine again. Throughout the fall semester, I called home regularly. My mom would give updates on Megan's college applications and Dad's work, but whenever I asked about Jake, the answers were vague. He's doing better, or he's got some promising opportunities. In hindsight, I should have pressed for more specific information, but part of me didn't want to know the truth. As Thanksgiving approached, I was looking forward to a few days of home-cooked meals and sleeping in my own bed. I didn't even think to ask if Jake was still there. It never occurred to me that in the 3 months I'd been gone, my parents would have given my room away permanently. That wasn't something parents did to their children, or so I thought. I finished my last class on Tuesday afternoon and immediately packed my car for the drive home. I texted my mom that I'd be home in time for dinner, and she responded with a thumbs-up emoji. The 3-hour drive gave me time to mentally transition from school mode to family mode. I was thinking about my mom's turkey and my dad's football commentary. I was looking forward to teasing Megan about her college applications. I wasn't prepared for what actually awaited me. I pulled into our driveway around 6:30 on Tuesday evening. The house looked the same, as always, decorated with a few early Christmas lights my dad must have put up the previous weekend. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat and headed inside, already smelling my mom's cooking. "I'm home," I called out as I stepped through the front door. My mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Otis, we weren't expecting you until later." She gave me a quick hug, then immediately returned to the kitchen where something was boiling over. My dad looked up from his recliner and nodded in my direction. "Good drive." "Yeah, traffic wasn't bad," I answered, already heading for the stairs. "I'm going to drop my stuff in my room." Neither of my parents said anything as I climbed the stairs, which should have been my first clue that something was wrong. I walked down the hallway past Megan's room, hearing her talking on the phone inside, and pushed open the door to my bedroom. Except it wasn't my bedroom anymore. The walls had been repainted a light gray. My twin bed was gone, replaced by a queen-sized bed with a black comforter. A large television hung on the wall where my Detroit Tigers pennant used to be. A gaming console sat on a new desk in the corner. The closet door was open, revealing clothes that definitely weren't mine. For a moment I thought I had somehow entered the wrong room, but that was impossible in our small house. I stood frozen in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing. None of my belongings were visible. Not my books, not my trophies, not the corkboard where I kept movie tickets and photos. "Mom," I called out, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Dad." I heard footsteps on the stairs, and then my mom appeared behind me. I turned to look at her, waiting for an explanation, waiting for her to tell me this was some kind of mistake. "Oh," she said, as if just remembering something trivial. "We gave your room to Jake. You can sleep on the couch." I stared at her, waiting for more. A explanation, an apology, anything. "Where's all my stuff?" I finally asked. "We boxed it up. Most of it's in the garage. Some of the things you hadn't used in years we gave away." She said this as casually as if telling me what we were having for dinner. "You gave away my things, without asking me." She frowned slightly, as if my question was unreasonable. "You're barely here anymore, Otis. Jake needs a stable place to live. He has a full-time job now. So you gave him my room." Permanently, I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. My dad appeared in the hallway then. "Your mom told you Jake needs stability right now. He's been doing really well since he got his job at the warehouse. 3 months now, that's a record for him. And that means he gets my room. I'm your son. This is my home too." My mom sighed. "Don't be dramatic, Otis. It's just a room. You're only here for holidays now anyway." I pushed past them and went downstairs trying to gather my thoughts. This couldn't be happening. Parents don't just give away their child's bedroom and belongings. I needed to understand what was going on. I found my sister Megan in the kitchen texting on her phone. "Did you know about this?" I asked her. She looked up, at least having the decency to appear uncomfortable. "About Jake getting your room." "Yeah, they did it like 2 months ago." 2 months. And nobody thought to tell me? She shrugged. "Mom said they'd tell you when you came home for Thanksgiving. I guess they just did." This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They've been planning this. Jake's job is close by. Megan offered as if that explained everything, and Aunt Debbie's been pressuring Mom to help him out more. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Jake walked in. He'd grown a patchy beard since I'd last seen him, and he was wearing a new leather jacket. "Hey, college boys home," he greeted me with a smirk. "How's the fancy education going?" I ignored his question. "So you're living in my room now?" He didn't even have the decency to look apologetic. "Yeah, Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert hooked me up. It's a sweet setup. Got my own television and everything." That was my room. "Well, you're not using it most of the year, are you? Seems like a waste to leave it empty." He brushed past me and opened the refrigerator, grabbing a beer like he owned the place. I looked at my sister, then at Jake, then back toward the living room where my parents were. I felt like I had stepped into some alternate reality, where I was a guest in my own home. Dinner that night was excruciating. My mom had made lasagna, not the traditional Thanksgiving meal I'd been looking forward to. "We're saving the turkey for Thursday, when everyone's here," she explained, as if that would make up for everything else. I picked at my food while my parents asked Jake detailed questions about his job at the warehouse. They listened attentively as he described his promotion to forklift operator, something he'd apparently achieved last week. "We're so proud of you," my mom told him, reaching over to squeeze his arm. I couldn't remember the last time she'd said she was proud of me, despite maintaining a 3.7 GPA while working part-time. After dinner, I helped clear the table, mostly to have something to do. I could hear my parents in the living room, their voices just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. I moved closer to the doorway. "He's being selfish," my dad was saying. "Jake needed a break, and Otis is barely here anyway." "He'll get over it," my mom replied. "He needs to grow up and understand that the world doesn't revolve around him. College has given him an inflated sense of entitlement." I stepped back, their words hitting me like physical blows. In their eyes, I was the selfish one for being upset that they had given away my room and belongings without even consulting me. Later that evening, I went out to the garage to see what remained of my possessions. There were 3 cardboard boxes labeled Otis stacked in the corner behind the lawnmower. I opened the first one to find books and papers haphazardly thrown together. My baseball trophies were in the second box, several of them broken. The third box contained random items from my desk drawers. But many things were missing. My collection of signed baseballs was nowhere to be found. The vintage Tigers jersey my grandfather had given me before he died was gone. The framed photo of my high school baseball team after we won the state championship wasn't there. When I asked my mom about these items, she vaguely recalled giving some sports memorabilia to my younger cousins because they would get more use out of it than you would. The jersey from my grandfather she claimed not to remember at all. "It must be somewhere," she said dismissively, already turning her attention back to the television show she was watching with Jake. That night I lay on the living room couch, unable to sleep. The couch was too short for my 6-foot frame, and every time I started to drift off, someone would come through to get a drink from the kitchen. Around midnight, Jake came downstairs and turned on the television, apparently not caring that I was trying to sleep. As I lay there in the dark, listening to Jake laugh at some late-night comedy show, I realized this wasn't just about a bedroom. This was about respect, about being valued as a member of the family. And clearly in this house I was no longer a priority. By Wednesday morning, the day before Thanksgiving, I had barely slept. My back ached from the uncomfortable couch, and my mind was racing with thoughts I couldn't quiet. I got up early before anyone else was awake and went for a long run around the neighborhood. The familiar streets offered no comfort, only emphasized how foreign my own home had become. When I returned, the house was awake and bustling with Thanksgiving preparations. My mom was in the kitchen already starting on pies. My dad and Jake were in the garage, apparently organizing for the arrival of more family the next day. "Can you run to the store for me?" my mom asked without looking up from her pie crust. "We need more butter and heavy cream." I showered quickly, pulled on fresh clothes, and drove to the local grocery store. It was crowded with last-minute Thanksgiving shoppers, everyone rushing to grab forgotten ingredients. As I waited in the checkout line, I checked my phone and saw a text from my friend Marcus. "Hey man, you back in town? Want to meet up before the family madness tomorrow?" Marcus and I had been friends since elementary school. His family lived just a few blocks from mine, and we'd stayed close even after going to different colleges. The thought of seeing a friendly face lifted my spirits slightly. "Definitely," I texted back. "Need to escape my house for a while. Coffee at Joe's in an hour." He replied with a thumbs up, and I felt a small sense of relief. At least someone in this town was happy to see me. I dropped off the groceries at home, told my mom I was meeting Marcus, and left before she could assign me another errand. Joe's Coffee was a local spot where all the high school kids used to hang out. Walking in felt like stepping back in time, and for a moment I could pretend things were normal. Marcus was already there, 2 coffees on the table. He stood to give me a quick hug before we both sat down. "So how's Michigan treating you?" he asked. "Still loving the business program?" "Yeah, classes are good. Tough but interesting." I hesitated, then added, "Home is weird though." "Weird how?" I told him everything. About coming home to find my room transformed, about my belongings being boxed up or given away, about sleeping on the couch while Jake enjoyed my bedroom. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "That's messed up, man," he said when I finished. "They didn't even call to warn you?" "Nope. Just surprised you don't have a bedroom anymore." "What are you going to do?" I shrugged. "What can I do? It's their house." "Yeah, but you're their son. That counts for something." Did it though? I wasn't so sure anymore. When I returned home, more relatives had arrived. My Aunt Debbie and Uncle Phil, Jake's parents, were in the living room with my parents. My mom's other sister, Aunt Carol, and her husband were there too, along with their kids. The house felt crowded and loud. "There he is," Aunt Debbie exclaimed when she saw me. "The college boy. How's university life treating you?" I gave non-committal answers to their questions about school, not wanting to engage more than necessary. I noticed how Aunt Debbie kept mentioning how proud she was of Jake for really turning things around with his warehouse job. "And your parents have been so wonderful," she gushed. "Taking him in, giving him a stable home environment. It's made such a difference." I glanced at my mom, who was beaming with pride, as if she'd done some charitable work by giving away my room. My dad nodded along, apparently not seeing anything wrong with the situation. "Where are you sleeping while you're home?" Aunt Carol asked me. Before I could answer, my mom jumped in. "He's on the couch. It's just for a few days." The couch? Aunt Carol looked confused. "But where's your room?" "We gave it to Jake," my mom explained, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Otis is only home for holidays now, and Jake needed a permanent space." "Oh." Aunt Carol looked uncomfortable for a moment, but then nodded. "Well, I suppose that makes sense." No one asked how I felt about it. No one seemed to think it was strange that my parents had given away my room without consulting me. The final straw came later that evening. Everyone was gathered in the living room, which also happened to be my current bedroom. The television was on. People were talking loudly, and I was trying to find a quiet corner to finish a paper that was due after the break. "Otis," my mom called from across the room. "Can you help set up the extra tables for tomorrow?" I set aside my laptop and spent the next hour rearranging furniture and setting up folding tables. When I returned to the living room, Jake was sitting in the spot I'd vacated using my laptop. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Just checking something," he replied without looking up. "Your password was easy to guess, by the way. Same one you've used since high school." I took my laptop back, anger rising. "Don't touch my stuff." "Geez, chill out." Jake rolled his eyes. "It's just a computer." "Is there a problem?" my dad asked, coming into the room. "Jake was using my laptop without permission," I said. My dad frowned. "He was just borrowing it for a minute, Otis. No need to overreact." Overreact. He broke into my password-protected laptop. "Maybe if you weren't so secretive about everything," my dad suggested, his tone implying I was being unreasonable. I closed my laptop and walked away, not trusting myself to respond. I went to the kitchen where my mom and aunts were preparing food for the next day. "Do you know where my Tigers jersey is?" I asked my mom. "The one Grandpa gave me before he died." She barely looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "I think we gave that to Jake. He's a big baseball fan now and you never wear it." I stared at her, speechless. That jersey was one of the few things I had from my grandfather, a keepsake I'd treasured for years. "You gave away Grandpa's jersey, without even asking me." "It was just sitting in your closet," she replied defensively. "Jake actually appreciates it." I left the kitchen before I said something I'd regret. In the hallway, I overheard my father talking to Uncle Phil. "College has changed him," my dad was saying. "He comes home with all these expectations like we're supposed to keep his room as a shrine or something. He needs to understand the real world doesn't work that way. Kids today don't understand sacrifice." Uncle Phil agreed. "They think everything should be handed to them." I'd worked 20 hours a week while maintaining a full course load. I'd taken out loans to minimize the burden on my parents. I'd given up my room without complaint when Jake first needed a place to stay, and I was the entitled one. In that moment, something inside me broke. The illusion that my parents valued me as much as they valued Jake, or that they respected me at all, shattered completely. This wasn't a temporary situation or a misunderstanding. This was a clear message about where I stood in the family hierarchy. I walked back into the living room where everyone was gathered. I stood there for a moment looking at these people who were supposed to be my family. Jake was wearing what looked suspiciously like my grandfather's Tigers jersey. My sister was absorbed in her phone. My parents were laughing with my aunts and uncles. No one even noticed me standing there. I made my decision. I went to the garage, gathered what remained of my possessions into my car, and then returned to the house. I grabbed my keys from the counter where I'd left them the day before. "I'm not staying here," I announced loud enough for everyone to hear. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. "What do you mean?" my mom asked, frowning. "I mean, I'm not sleeping on the couch in my own home while Jake lives in my room and wears my grandfather's jersey. I'm going somewhere else." "Don't be ridiculous," my dad said dismissively. "Where would you go? It's Thanksgiving tomorrow." I tossed my keys on the counter with a deliberate clink. "Actually, I'll sleep somewhere else. I've already packed my car." My mom laughed nervously. "Otis, stop being dramatic. Of course you're staying here." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not." And without another word, I walked out the front door. The crisp November air hit my face as I closed the front door behind me. For a moment, I stood on the porch, half expecting someone to come after me. No one did. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away from the house I'd grown up in. I had no concrete plan, just an overwhelming need to be anywhere but there. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind racing. Where could I go? What would I do about Thanksgiving? Should I just drive back to campus 3 hours away? My phone started buzzing with texts. First from my mom, "Stop being childish and come home." Then from my dad, "You're embarrassing yourself and your mother. Grow up." My sister, "Where did you go? Mom is freaking out." Even Jake had the audacity to text drama queen much. "Can I have your PlayStation if you're not coming back?" I turned off notifications and kept driving. After about 30 minutes, I pulled into the parking lot of a chain hotel just off the highway. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and available. I checked in for 2 nights, paying with the emergency credit card I rarely used. My room was basic but private. It had a queen-sized bed, a desk, and most importantly, a door I could close. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over me like a wave. Had I overreacted? Was I being childish as my parents suggested? No, I decided. What they had done went beyond inconsiderate. They had erased my place in our home without a second thought. They had given away meaningful possessions that weren't theirs to give. They had made it clear that my cousin's comfort was more important than my belonging. I turned my phone back on and was immediately bombarded with more messages. My parents had progressed from anger to guilt. "We're worried about you," my mom texted. "Please let us know you're safe." "Your mother is upset," my dad wrote. "Is that what you wanted?" I replied with a brief message, "I'm safe. I have a place to stay. I'll be in touch." Then I silenced my phone again and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. What now? The answer came to me clearly. I reached for my phone and called Marcus. "Hey," he answered on the second ring. "You okay? I've been getting weird texts from Megan asking if I know where you are." "I left," I told him. "I couldn't stay there." "Left? Where are you now?" "Hotel off Highway 42. There was a pause. "A hotel? Dude, that's ridiculous. Hold on." I heard muffled voices as Marcus apparently covered the phone to speak to someone else. Then he came back on the line. "My mom says you're coming here. We have a guest room and you're joining us for Thanksgiving. No arguments." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Are you sure I don't want to impose?" "Impose? You're practically family. My mom's already making up the guest bed. Just get over here." 20 minutes later, I pulled into Marcus's driveway. He was waiting on the front porch and came to help me with my bags. His mom, Mrs. Sullivan, met us at the door. "Otis, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Marcus told us what happened. You're staying with us as long as you need to." The Sullivans' house was smaller than my parents', but it had always felt warmer somehow. The guest room was tiny, just a twin bed and a small dresser, but it was private and offered freely. "Bathrooms down the hall," Mrs. Sullivan reminded me. "Towels are in the linen closet. Make yourself at home. We're having lasagna for dinner. Should be ready in about 30 minutes." I thanked her, genuinely touched by the simple kindness of being welcomed. "Marcus told us the basics," Mr. Sullivan said as we ate dinner around their kitchen table. "But I'm having trouble understanding how parents could just give away their child's room without discussion." I shrugged, embarrassed to be discussing my family problems. They've always had a soft spot for Jake. He's had a rough time and they want to help him. "At your expense." Mrs. Sullivan looked genuinely perplexed. "That's not right, Otis." "Have they always treated you this way?" Mr. Sullivan asked gently. The question made me think. Had they? There had always been small signs, instances where my achievements were downplayed while cousins or family friends were praised for lesser accomplishments. Times when my needs were set aside for others. The room situation was just the most egregious example of a pattern that had always existed. I guess I never saw it clearly before I admitted. That night in the Sullivans' guest room, I slept better than I had in months. The bed was small but comfortable, and more importantly, I felt respected and welcome. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and clear. I woke to the smell of coffee and baking. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt about not being with my family for the holiday. Then I remembered why I had left, and the guilt faded. My phone had accumulated more messages overnight. My parents had progressed from anger to concern to manipulation. "If this is about tuition, we can discuss it when you come home," my mom had texted, as if my reaction could only be about money. "Your sister is very upset that you've ruined Thanksgiving," my dad wrote, attempting to shift the guilt to me. Megan's messages were more direct. "Where are you? Mom keeps asking if I know where you went. She's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown." That last part made me pause. A breakdown. Was that the narrative they were creating, that I was mentally unstable rather than justifiably upset? Around noon, Megan showed up at the Sullivans' house. "I figured you'd be here," she said when I answered the door. "Can we talk?" We sat on the front porch, the November air crisp around us. "Mom and Dad are telling everyone you're having mental health issues," she informed me. "They're saying the stress of college got to you, and you snapped over nothing." Over nothing. They gave away my room and my belongings without even asking me. Megan sighed. "I know. It's messed up. I told them they should have at least called you first." Would that have changed anything? Would they have reconsidered if I'd objected over the phone? She looked away. Probably not. They had already promised Jake he could stay as long as he wanted. We sat in silence for a moment. "Are you coming back?" she finally asked. "Not right now. The Sullivans invited me to stay for Thanksgiving. Mom's going to be upset." "I'm already the villain in their story," I pointed out. "Might as well skip the uncomfortable dinner, too." Megan left after extracting a promise that I'd text her later. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. sad that my relationship with my family had deteriorated to this point, but relieved that I had drawn a line. Thanksgiving with the Sullivans was everything a family holiday should be. There was delicious food, genuine conversation, and not a hint of the tension that had characterized gatherings at my parents' house. Mrs. Sullivan made sure I had seconds of everything, and Mr. Sullivan shared stories about his own college days. Marcus's younger sister, Emma, asked about my classes with genuine interest. "You're welcome to stay through the weekend," Mrs. Sullivan told me as we cleaned up after dinner, "or longer if you need to." "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than she could know. "But I should probably head back to campus soon. I have assignments due after the break." The contrast between the Sullivans' generous hospitality and my own family's treatment of me was stark. This was how family was supposed to treat each other, with respect and consideration. That evening I called my academic advisor, Dr. Brown, who had given us his personal number for emergencies. "I'm sorry to bother you on Thanksgiving," I began. "Not a problem, Otis. What's going on?" I explained my situation briefly, focusing on the practical aspects rather than the emotional ones. I needed to know my options for winter break, which was coming up in just a few weeks. "You're not the first student to need alternative housing during breaks," Dr. Brown assured me. "The university keeps some dorms open for international students who can't go home. I can add you to that list for winter break." "What about costs?" I asked, concerned. "There's a fee, but we might be able to get it waived in your case. Let me look into it and get back to you." That night I sent a text to my parents. "I'm safe and staying with friends. I'll be returning to campus after the weekend. We can talk when I'm ready." It was short but clear. I was setting a boundary, perhaps for the first time in my life. The weekend after Thanksgiving passed quickly. I stayed with the Sullivans, who treated me like another son. Mrs. Sullivan insisted on cooking big breakfasts, and Mr. Sullivan invited me to watch football with him. It was a glimpse into what family support should look like. On Saturday, Marcus and I met up with some other friends from high school who were home for the break. We gathered at our old hangout spot, a pizza place that hadn't changed since we were 15. "So you're just not going back home at all?" asked Derek, who had been on the baseball team with me. "Not right now," I confirmed. "Maybe eventually, but things need to change first." "That's rough, man," he said sympathetically. "But I get it. My parents pulled something similar with my sister last year. Not as bad as giving away her room, but they definitely favor my younger brother." "How's she handling it?" I asked, curious how others navigated family dysfunction. "She limited contact for a while. Only sees them on major holidays, keeps conversations superficial. It sucks, but she says it's better for her mental health." It was reassuring to hear I wasn't alone in dealing with family issues. As we talked, I realized many of my friends had complicated relationships with their parents, though few had experienced anything quite as extreme as having their bedroom given away. Sunday afternoon, I received a text from my roommate, Ben. "Hey, heard from your sister that things are rough with your family. You okay?" I hadn't told Ben much about my family situation, but we had become good friends over the past year. I called him rather than trying to explain everything by text. "That's seriously messed up," he said after I recounted what had happened. "Listen, if you need a place for winter break, my parents said you could stay with us. We've got plenty of room, and we're only an hour from campus." His offer touched me deeply. "Thanks, man. Dr. Brown is looking into letting me stay in the dorms, but I might take you up on that. Either way, you've got options. Don't let your parents manipulate you into a situation that makes you miserable." On Monday morning, I drove back to campus 3 days earlier than planned. The university was quiet, with most students still away for the break, which suited my mood perfectly. I used the time to catch up on assignments and think about my next steps. Dr. Brown emailed with good news. Not only could I stay in the dorms during winter break, but he had also found a job opening in the campus technology department that would provide some additional income. "They're looking for students who can work through breaks," he wrote. "The pay is better than most campus jobs, and it would give you more financial independence." I applied immediately and was called for an interview the next day. The position involved providing technical support for campus computer labs, something I had experience with from a previous job. By Wednesday, I was hired. "We're especially interested in students who can work during breaks when most go home," the department manager explained. You'd be helping us out by being available then. It felt like pieces were falling into place, creating a path forward that didn't depend on my parents' support or approval. For the first time since the shock of finding my bedroom transformed, I felt a sense of control over my situation. My parents continued to text and call, their messages alternating between guilt trips and demands that I stop this nonsense and apologize. I responded only to let them know I was safe on campus, maintaining firm boundaries about further communication. Jake, surprisingly, was the one family member who reached out in a somewhat conciliatory way. "Look, I didn't know they hadn't told you about the room thing," he texted. "That's on them, not me. But I am sorry about wearing your jersey. That was crossing a line." It wasn't much, but it was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from anyone in my family. I acknowledged his message with a brief, "Thanks for saying that," but didn't engage further. As classes resumed after the break, I threw myself into my studies and my new job. The work at the technology department was interesting and less physically demanding than my previous campus jobs, allowing me more energy for classes. My grades, which had been good before, improved even further. My roommate Ben became an even closer friend, offering support without judgment. He invited me to his family's home for weekend visits, introducing me to his parents, who welcomed me warmly. "Our house is always open to you," Ben's mom told me during my first visit. "Any friend of Ben's is family to us." That word family had taken on new meaning for me. I was beginning to understand that family wasn't just about blood relations or legal ties. It was about respect, consideration, and mutual support. By that definition, the Sullivans and Ben's family were showing me more family love than my biological relatives had in years. As winter break approached, I continued to maintain limited contact with my parents. They had progressed to offering compromises, suggesting I could have my room back next summer, or that they would discuss returning some of my belongings. "Too little too late," Marcus commented when I showed him these messages. "They're only offering because there were consequences to their actions." He was right. If I had simply accepted sleeping on the couch and having my possessions given away, nothing would have changed. It was only my departure and continued absence that prompted any reconsideration on their part. 2 weeks before winter break, Dr. Brown suggested I meet with a counselor at the university's mental health center. "What you're going through with your family is significant," he explained. "Having professional support could be beneficial." I was hesitant at first, still carrying the stigma many young men feel about seeking mental health support. But after my first session with Dr. Rivera, I wished I'd started counseling sooner. "What your parents did wasn't just inconsiderate," she told me during our first meeting. "It was a fundamental breach of trust. Your reaction wasn't an overreaction, it was a healthy response to an unhealthy situation." Her validation helped me understand that I wasn't being overly sensitive or childish, as my parents had suggested. I was setting appropriate boundaries after years of having them violated. With Dr. Rivera's guidance, I began to see patterns in my family's behavior that I had normalized over the years. The constant prioritizing of extended family over my sister and me, the dismissal of my feelings and achievements, the expectation that I would always accommodate others without complaint. "These aren't healthy family dynamics," Dr. Rivera explained. "And recognizing that doesn't mean you don't love your family. It means you're seeing the situation clearly, perhaps for the first time." By the time winter break arrived, I had a clear plan. I would stay in the dorms, work at my new job, and use the time to focus on my own well-being. I had politely declined Ben's invitation to join his family for Christmas, feeling I needed the solitude to process everything that had happened. My sister Megan called the day before break began. "Mom and Dad want to know if you're coming home for Christmas," she said, her tone cautious. "I'm not," I told her. "I'm staying on campus." "They're really upset, Otis. They've been telling everyone you're going through a phase or having a breakdown. That's their narrative. It's not the truth." "I know," she admitted quietly. "After seeing how they handled things with you, I'm starting to notice stuff I never did before. The way they always cave to whatever Aunt Debbie wants. How they never seem to take our side in anything." It was heartening to hear Megan developing her own awareness of our family dynamics. She was still living at home, still subject to our parents' direct influence, but she was beginning to question things she had previously accepted. "Just be careful," I advised her. You still have to live with them until you graduate. I'm applying to colleges further away, she confided, not just the local ones they want me to consider. I smiled at that small act of rebellion. Good for you. As winter break began and campus emptied out, I found unexpected peace in the quiet dorms. My job kept me busy during the day, and in the evenings I explored hobbies I'd never had time for before. I started running regularly, joined an online book club, and even took a free online course in personal finance. On Christmas Day, I received a package from my parents. Inside were some of my missing belongings, including 2 of the signed baseballs from my collection, though not my grandfather's jersey. There was also a card with a check for $500 and a note that read, "We hope you'll reconsider your decision and come home. We miss you. Love, Mom and Dad." It was the first acknowledgement that they might have done something wrong, though they still couldn't bring themselves to actually apologize. The check felt like an attempt to buy my return rather than address the real issues. I put the check in my desk drawer, unwilling to cash it, but not quite ready to return it either. It represented a complicated mix of genuine parental concern and continued manipulation that I wasn't prepared to untangle yet. That evening I video called Marcus and his family, who were gathered for their Christmas dinner. They showed me their tree and gifts, and Mrs. Sullivan held up a present they had for me whenever you want to come by and get it. Later I spoke with Ben, who was enjoying a noisy family Christmas with cousins and grandparents. "Miss you, man," he said. "It's not the same without your sarcastic commentary." These connections, these chosen relationships, were sustaining me through what could have been a very lonely holiday. They reminded me that while I might be physically alone in an empty dorm, I was far from alone in the world. As January arrived and the spring semester began, I settled into a new normal. My classes were challenging, but engaging my job at the technology department was going well, and I had established a routine that felt stable and productive. I continued meeting with Dr. Rivera weekly, working through my feelings about my family situation. At some point she suggested during one session you may want to have a direct conversation with your parents about what happened and what needs to change for your relationship to improve. "I'm not sure they're capable of hearing me," I admitted. "They've never been good at acknowledging when they're wrong." "That may be true," she agreed, "but expressing your feelings and boundaries clearly gives you closure regardless of how they respond." She was right. While I had physically removed myself from the situation, I hadn't fully processed it emotionally. There were still unresolved feelings, things left unsaid that needed saying. In early February, I decided it was time. I texted my parents asking if I could come by the house on the coming Saturday to collect more of my belongings. My mom responded immediately with enthusiasm, clearly hoping this was the first step toward things returning to normal. "We'll make your favorite dinner," she texted, missing the point entirely. I clarified that I would only be there briefly to get my things, not staying for a meal. I asked Marcus if he would come with me, partly for emotional support and partly to help load boxes into my car. Of course, he agreed without hesitation. "I've got your back." Saturday arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I drove the familiar route to my parents' house. Marcus sat beside me, offering quiet encouragement. "Remember," he said as we pulled into the driveway, "you don't owe them anything. Say what you need to say, get your stuff, and we're out." My mom answered the door before I could even knock her expression, a forced brightness that didn't reach her eyes. "Otis, it's so good to see you." She moved as if to hug me, but I stepped back, slightly maintaining distance. Her smile faltered. My dad appeared behind her, his greeting more subdued. "Son." I nodded acknowledgement but didn't smile. "I'm here for my things." Of course," my mom said, ushering us inside. "We've gathered everything up for you. It's in boxes in the living room." The house looked the same as it always had, yet felt completely different to me now. What had once been home now felt like a place I was visiting, with all the awkwardness that entailed. Jake wasn't there, which was a small relief. My sister Megan came downstairs when she heard us, greeting me with a genuine hug. "How's campus?" she asked, her question carrying multiple meanings. "Good," I replied. "Really good, actually." In the living room, several boxes were stacked neatly, more than I had expected. As I began to look through them, I realized my parents had made an effort to collect items that had previously been missing or given away. "We got most of your things back," my mom explained, hovering nearby. Your Aunt Debbie had your baseball collection, and your cousins returned those books they borrowed. I nodded, continuing to sort through the boxes. My grandfather's Tigers jersey was noticeably absent. Jake still has the jersey, my dad said, as if reading my thoughts. He's very attached to it. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze directly. That jersey was from Grandpa. It wasn't yours to give away. My dad shifted uncomfortably. Well, maybe Jake can give it back eventually, when he's ready. The comment sparked something in me. When Jake was ready, what about what I wanted or needed? It was the same pattern, always prioritizing others over me. I'd like to talk about what happened, I said, straightening up. About why I left at Thanksgiving. My parents exchanged glances. We know you were upset about the room situation, my mom began cautiously. It wasn't just the room, I said, keeping my voice steady. It was the complete lack of respect. You gave away my bedroom without even discussing it with me. You gave away personal possessions that meant a lot to me. And when I expressed how hurt I was, you dismissed my feelings and called me childish. My dad's posture stiffened defensively. We made a decision that was best for the family. Jake needed a stable environment, and you're barely home anyway. I'm barely home because I'm at college, working toward my future. That doesn't mean I don't deserve a place in this house, or that my belongings are up for grabs. You're being dramatic, my dad started, but my mom placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Maybe we should have handled it differently, she conceded, the first real acknowledgement that they might have been wrong. There's no maybe about it, I said firmly. What you did showed me where I stand in this family, and it's not where a son should stand. I've spent the past few months building a life that doesn't depend on your support, and I've realized I deserve better than what I've been getting here. My dad looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have given him pause. Megan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. They've been different since you left, more careful about how they treat me. I think they realize they messed up. My mom's eyes filled with tears. We never meant to hurt you, Otis. We love you. We just got caught up in trying to help Jake, and we didn't think about how it would affect you. That's the problem, I said. You didn't think about me at all. And it's not the first time. It's just the first time I couldn't ignore it or explain it away. There was a heavy silence as my words sank in. What can we do? My mom finally asked. How do we fix this? It was a more direct question than I had expected, and it deserved a direct answer. I need you to understand that what you did was wrong, not just inconvenient or inconsiderate, but fundamentally disrespectful. I need acknowledgement and a genuine apology, not excuses. And I need to see real changes in how you treat me and value my place in this family before I can trust you again. My dad looked uncomfortable but nodded slowly. We can work on that. And I want my grandfather's jersey back, I added. That's non-negotiable. We'll talk to Jake, my mom promised. Marcus and I loaded the boxes into my car. As we were finishing, my mom approached me again. Will you come for dinner sometime? She asked hesitantly. We miss you. I considered her request. Not right now. I need time. But maybe eventually when things feel different. She nodded, accepting my boundary even if she didn't fully understand it. As we drove away, Marcus glanced at me. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. That went better than I expected. They seemed to actually listen a little bit. A little, I agreed. It's a start. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in my parents' approach. They texted occasionally but didn't pressure me to respond immediately. When they did mention coming home, it was framed as an invitation rather than an expectation. Small steps, but meaningful ones. In March, Megan called to tell me Jake had finally moved out. He got an apartment with some friends closer to the warehouse, she explained. Dad helped him move last weekend. How do you feel about that? I asked. Relieved, she admitted. It was weird having him here all the time. Like he was another brother, but one who got special treatment. A week later, a package arrived at my dorm. Inside was my grandfather's Tigers jersey, carefully folded with a note from my mom. Jake returned this. It belongs with you. We're sorry we ever gave it away. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a tangible acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. I placed the jersey carefully in my closet, a small piece of my past reclaimed. Marcus's parents suggested a family therapy session might help facilitate better communication between me and my parents. I was hesitant at first, but after discussing it with Dr. Rivera, I agreed it could be beneficial. Having a neutral third party can prevent old patterns from taking over the conversation, she explained. I proposed the idea to my parents, expecting resistance, especially from my dad. To my surprise, they agreed readily. "We'll do whatever it takes," my mom said. "We want to make things right." The therapy session was uncomfortable but productive. The therapist, Dr. Chen, created a space where all of us could express our feelings without interruption or defensiveness. I felt replaced, I told my parents honestly, like I was disposable in my own family. My mom cried at that genuine tears of remorse. "We never meant to make you feel that way. We got so caught up in helping Jake that we lost sight of how it would affect you." My dad, usually quick to defend or deflect, spoke with unusual vulnerability. "I think we've always found it easier to focus on other people's kids than our own. With you and Megan, we set high expectations and then took it for granted when you met them. With Jake and your other cousins, any small achievement seemed like a big deal because our expectations were lower." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard my father say about our family dynamics. For the first time, I felt like he actually saw the pattern that had hurt me. Dr. Chen guided us toward establishing new boundaries and expectations. We agreed to regular phone calls, but with the understanding that I would visit home only when I felt comfortable doing so. My parents committed to asking before making any decisions that affected me, even indirectly. "This is just the beginning of the conversation," Dr. Chen reminded us as the session ended. "Rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort from everyone." As spring semester progressed, I maintained my independence while allowing for careful reconnection with my family. My parents seemed genuinely committed to changing their behavior, though there were occasional slips into old patterns that required gentle correction. When I did finally visit home again in late April, I found my old bedroom had been restored, painted back to its original blue. My desk and bookshelf were in their original positions, though the room still felt different, altered by what had happened. "We wanted you to know you always have a place here," my mom explained as she showed me the room, "even if you don't use it much anymore." It was a gesture that meant more than the physical space itself. It represented an acknowledgement of my place in the family, my right to belong even when I wasn't physically present. That visit was brief but civil, a small step toward a new kind of relationship with my parents. Not the unquestioning dependence of childhood, but not complete estrangement either. Something in between based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As the school year ended and summer approached, I had options I hadn't imagined back in November. I had secured a paid internship in Ann Arbor that would allow me to stay near campus. My financial aid package for the next year had increased thanks to Dr. Brown's advocacy. I had friends who valued and respected me, and a growing sense of confidence in my ability to navigate difficult situations. I had also learned something valuable about family, that sometimes walking away, even temporarily, is necessary for healing, that love without respect isn't enough, and that family can be found and created in unexpected places when your biological one falls short. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving break, I found myself driving home again, this time with a very different mindset. The past 12 months had transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined when I first walked out of my parents' house that November evening. Academically, I'd thrived. My focus on schoolwork and reduced family stress had resulted in a 3.9 GPA for the year. The job at the technology department had evolved into a research assistantship with one of my business professors, leading to opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. Financially, I'd achieved a level of independence that gave me security and confidence. Between scholarships, my campus job, and careful budgeting, I no longer depended on my parents for basic expenses. They still contributed to my tuition, but it was now a choice rather than a necessity, removing the leverage they had once held over me. Most importantly, I'd developed a clearer understanding of healthy relationships and personal boundaries. Weekly sessions with Dr. Rivera had helped me recognize patterns from my childhood that I never wanted to repeat in my own future family. My relationship with my parents had entered a new phase, one built on cautious respect rather than unconditional acceptance. They had made efforts to change, some more successful than others. My mom had become more conscious of how she spoke to me, replacing dismissive comments with genuine questions about my life and interests. She texted regularly, but accepted when I couldn't respond immediately. For her birthday, I'd sent flowers, a small gesture of reconnection that acknowledged the progress she'd made. My dad struggled more with changing long-established patterns. He still occasionally made comments about the cost of my education or compared me to cousins in ways that felt diminishing. But when called on these behaviors, he now made efforts to correct himself rather than becoming defensive. It was progress, albeit slow and imperfect. Jake had moved on both physically and metaphorically. After getting his own apartment, he'd had to learn self-sufficiency the hard way. According to Megan, he'd cycled through 3 jobs in 6 months before finally settling into a position at a local manufacturing company. My parents still helped him occasionally, but were less quick to rescue him from every difficulty. The most surprising development had been Megan's transformation. Inspired partly by my example, she had found her own voice and begun setting boundaries with our parents. She'd chosen to attend Northwestern University 4 hours away from home despite our parents' preference that she stay local. She'd also become more outspoken about inequities in how extended family was treated. "You basically blew up the family system," she told me during one of our regular phone calls. "After you left, they couldn't pretend everything was normal anymore." It made space for me to ask for what I needed too. As I pulled into my parents' driveway for Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after the bedroom incident, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was still some residual hurt, but also appreciation for the growth that had come from that painful experience. My mom greeted me with a restrained hug, respecting the emotional distance I still maintained. "It's good to have you home," she said simply. My dad shook my hand, then awkwardly pulled me into a brief hug. "Your room's all set up," he told me, emphasizing the "your" slightly. Indeed, my bedroom was now definitively mine again. My parents had made efforts to restore it to something resembling its former state, though some things could never be exactly the same. The walls were blue again. My desk was in its familiar corner, and my remaining sports memorabilia was displayed on the shelves. They had even created a new display for my grandfather's Tigers jersey, now framed behind glass on the wall. It was both an acknowledgement of past wrongs and a promise not to repeat them. Thanksgiving dinner that year was smaller than usual. Aunt Debbie and Uncle Phil were there with their younger children, but Jake had chosen to spend the holiday with friends. The atmosphere was noticeably different: conversations, more genuine and less performative. During a quiet moment after dinner, my mom found me alone in the kitchen. "I've been thinking a lot about last year," she said, her voice soft. "About how we made you feel unwelcome in your own home." I nodded, acknowledging her words without interrupting. "I want you to know that I understand better now why you left. It wasn't just about the room. It was about respect. And you deserved better from us." It was the most direct apology she had offered, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot." Later that evening, my dad joined me on the back porch where I was enjoying the crisp night air. "Your sister tells me you're doing really well at school," he said, his breath visible in the cold. "Yeah, the business program is challenging, but I'm enjoying it." He nodded, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "I'm proud of you, Otis. Not just for the grades or the job, but for standing up for yourself. That takes courage." Coming from my dad, who rarely expressed emotional support so directly, the words carried special weight. "I learned it somewhere," I replied, offering a small olive branch. He smiled slightly, understanding the reference to his own stubborn nature, the part of himself he'd passed on to me that had ultimately allowed me to break free from unhealthy family patterns. That weekend visit wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old habits that threatened to resurface. But there was also a new foundation of mutual respect that made those moments manageable rather than devastating. When I returned to campus after the break, I met with Dr. Rivera for our regular session. "How was it facing the anniversary of such a difficult experience?" she asked. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "They've changed. Not completely, but enough that I can see they're trying." "And how have you changed over this past year?" The question made me pause and reflect. "I trust myself more," I finally said. "I know what I need in relationships now, and I'm not afraid to ask for it. I understand that love without respect isn't really love at all. She nodded approvingly. That's significant growth, Otis. Many people never learn that lesson. As winter break approached, I had options that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Ben had invited me to join his family for part of the break. Marcus's parents had extended a similar invitation, and my own parents had asked without pressure if I would consider spending Christmas at home. I decided to split my time a week with my parents and sister, a few days with Ben's family, and the remainder on campus where I could earn extra money working additional hours at my job. It was a balance that felt right, honoring the progress my family had made, while maintaining the independence I had worked so hard to establish. On Christmas morning at my parents' house, my dad handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This is something that should have been yours all along," he said. Inside was a key ring with 3 keys, one to the front door, one to the back door, and one to my bedroom door newly installed. "Your room will always be your room," he said, "with a lock so no one else can use it without your permission. Ever." It was a tangible symbol of the respect I had demanded and finally received. Not just access to the house, but guaranteed private space within it, protected by a boundary only I could open. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. As we moved into the new year, I continued building a life balanced between independence and family connection. I maintained my campus job and research position, strengthened friendships with people like Ben and Marcus, who had supported me through difficult times, and cautiously rebuilt trust with my parents through consistent, respectful interaction. My sister Megan thrived in her first year at Northwestern, calling me regularly for advice about navigating college life and family expectations. Our shared experience had brought us closer, transforming us from siblings who lived parallel lives to genuine allies and friends. The family dynamics continued to evolve in positive ways. My parents became more conscious of how they distributed their attention and support. Jake developed greater independence, gradually requiring less rescue from my parents. Extended family gatherings became more balanced with less obvious favoritism. None of these changes happened overnight or without occasional setbacks. Old habits resurfaced during times of stress, requiring gentle but firm correction. But the overall trajectory was positive, moving toward healthier patterns for everyone involved. Looking back from the perspective of a year's distance, I could see that walking out that Thanksgiving night had been a turning point not just for me, but for my entire family. By refusing to accept disrespect, I had created space for necessary change. By setting boundaries, I had actually strengthened relationships rather than destroying them. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no to unhealthy patterns. That respect is not negotiable in meaningful relationships. That family can be both given by birth and chosen through connection. And that healing, while never perfect or complete, is always possible when people are willing to grow. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you cared about to protect your own well-being, or had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Drop a comment below to share your experience. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from my journey. And remember, sometimes the hardest step to take is the one that leads you away from toxicity and towards self-respect. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand firm in your worth, no matter who tries to diminish it.